Have you ever noticed how easy it is to recognize someone else's mistakes, and how difficult it is to admit our own? Why is that? It could be pride, but I think something much deeper. Because underneath almost every criticism, there's a question. One we rarely verbalize. Internally, it sounds something like this: what are you saying about me? When such a question appears, everything moves in a different direction. The conversation then takes an unexpected turn. It becomes about who we are. Because when our identity feels threatened, we stop looking for room for improvement, the truth, or what makes sense, and mainly focus on protecting ourselves. Can you remember the last time someone criticized you? Maybe you were accused of not being attentive, or told your performance is lacking. Maybe a friend pointed out something you'd done wrong. Perhaps on the surface they were talking about your behavior, but inside it didn't feel like that. Instead, you quietly translated it to, "They think I'm not good enough," or "They think I'm a failure." That's why criticism hurts. Mainly because too often we confuse our action or performance with who we are. And once our identity feels threatened, our priorities, what matters most, tend to change. We stop asking, "Is this true?" or "How do I correct this?" And instead we start asking, "How do I protect myself?" To shield ourselves from the blows, we armor up and become intensely defensive. We even start to overly explain ourselves, justify our actions, or blame external circumstances. Most likely, we attack the person giving us their feedback. Learning suddenly feels dangerous. Because if being wrong means I'm somehow less worthy, then admitting I'm wrong becomes nearly impossible. But here's where the real problem begins. Somewhere along the way, we started believing that what we do equals who we are. And from here on, a bad decision becomes, I'm a bad person. And failure becomes, I am a failure. How does making one mistake creates an entire identity? Now when faced with an attack, every criticism feels like rejection, every setback feels permanent, and every failure feels like proof. And the very truths that could help you grow now become what you're too afraid to hear. Now imagine your closest friend, after messing up, says to you, "I'm a complete failure." How would you respond? You probably wouldn't tell them they're perfect, because that wouldn't be honest. Instead, you'd remind them of what they've forgotten. For example, their courage, kindness, or the obstacles they've already overcome. Perhaps you'd mention the people whose lives they've touched. To restore perspective, you'd help them remember the truth. Strangely, we do this for other people, but we simply don't know how to do it for ourselves. Inside our own minds, we become prosecutors, where every mistake becomes evidence against us, regrets become testimony, and failure strengthens every reason to seal a perceived fate. We speak to ourselves in ways we'd never speak to another human being, and then wonder why we're afraid of criticism. Confidence has a tendency to rise and fall. Some days it's strong, and other days it disappears completely. But security is on a different level. Security says, failing has nothing to do with my worth. That's a much deeper foundation. Because when your worth isn't on trial, you don't need to defend it. Instead, you become free to ask, what can I learn from this? Self-affirmation is often mistaken for vanity. But they're almost opposites. Vanity desperately protects an image. It needs admiration and fears imperfection. Self-respect, on the other hand, doesn't pretend to be flawless. It simply refuses to believe that flaws erase dignity. For example, vanity says, I need everyone to think highly of me. But self-respect says I can afford to be honest. And only the latter allows you to grow. Self-affirmation, when done right, isn't standing in front of a mirror saying, I'm amazing. It's something much humbler and quieter. It's about remembering what's still true about you, even on your worst day. It recognizes that you've loved, endured, you've learned, and have been forgiven. Or that you've gotten back up before, even after a hard fall. It's not about pretending you're extraordinary, but about refusing to forget your true human qualities. Perhaps the most important distinction we can make is this. Your behavior deserves to be judged with honesty. Whether wise or foolish, kind or unkind, courageous or fearful, your worth is something different. Imagine your worth as the ground beneath your feet, and your behavior is the path you walk upon it. If you confuse the two, every stumble might feel like the ground has disappeared altogether. Separate them, and every mistake becomes an opportunity to regain your footing. Maybe maturity isn't about making fewer mistakes, but becoming less afraid of them, because something amazing happens when your worth no longer depends on always being right. You become curious instead of judgmental. You listen more attentively. You apologize easily. And you learn readily. The truth stops feeling like an enemy and becomes your teacher. Perhaps that's the deepest form of courage, not to never fail, but to believe that whatever the truth reveals can shape you without ever diminishing your worth. Because the strongest people aren't the ones who never fall. No, they're the ones who can face the truth, learn from it, and, in the end, still know exactly who they truly are or were meant to be.